Under this week's current task, you will find notes and a material for a nonfiction text unit. You're going to be accessing these resources over the course of quarter two, meaning our entire quarter you will be accessing this material to know and understand new content. If you look here, you'll see that there are 3 resources attached. The first one, our nonfiction text unit, gives us our notes here. Sorry about that. When you're here, you'll notice there's a table of contents. I first want to talk about behavior cues. Behavior cues tell you what kind of resource is being shared. So if it's something you need to read, you'll see the book. If it's something you need to listen to, you'll see headphones. If you need to explore or research or learn even more about it through the resource I've shared, then you'll see this little magnifying glass. If it's a video, you'll see this video camera. And if it's a resource that you will use when preparing your own writing pieces, you will see this paper with pencil. So be on a lookout as we continue through this unit for these specific visual cues. They will help you know exactly what a resource is meant for as we continue through our unit. You will also see that we have lessons 2.1 all the way through lesson 2.8. We also have 2 other pieces, driving word meanings and understanding connectives. And we're going to be working on these separately throughout this entire unit, and it will all kind of be tied in together at the same time. However, when accessing notes or resources, you can come back to the same unit notes to find that information. For today's purposes, we're going to focus in on lesson 2.1. So all I have to do is hover my mouse over where it says lesson 2.1 in blue and click. And it's going to take me directly to that location in my notes. Now you'll notice the title. Our title is Noticing How Nonfiction Authors Choose to Organize Information. So I want to stop and think about this here. When I say organize information, I mean, how are my authors taking the information they have, sharing with us, our facts and things that we need to learn, the important information about a topic or a person? How are they providing that information to us? How are they organizing it so that we can best read and understand? And you'll notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different ways that authors might organize information. And we're going to be taking a look deep into each of these 5 ways to organize information as we continue in our instruction throughout the week. So the first thing we're going to look at is this. We want to take a look at, chronological order. Chronological is when we describe a series of events in the order that they have happened. First, second, third, fourth. Keeping in mind that this is a series of events. Temporal organization is the same idea. It talks about sequence, so we're still focusing on sequence and order, but now we're talking about in the way something occurs, the steps of a process. For example, if I'm making a recipe, what are the steps of the recipe that I need to make? I can access this resource here, and you'll notice it has a magnifying glass to look more at that I will have to read, but I can also use this resource in my writing. If I open this up, it's going to take me to a resource of time order words. These are all words that authors might use when writing or organizing information in a nonfiction text, but when they are using chronological or temporal order. So basically, when they are writing their text, their information, organizing it in a sequence. And you might see some or all of these words in a text that you're reading, or you might use these words as a writer. So again, when we're looking at chronological order or temporal order, we want to remember the word sequence. because this means that we are putting it in order. We are sequencing the events and the information in a specific way. Now, another way that nonfiction authors can organize information is when we look at categories and subcategories. Now, this is when we're looking at the topics specifically that an author might be using, details, and the descriptions of those topics. Sometimes when we read nonfiction text, we might see that there is a chapter, and within that chapter, there are subtopics and subheadings. And that is where we get our categories and subcategories. So if I go in here and I click this graphic organizer that's available, you're going to see this type of organizer. So this would be what my book is all about. So my main topic. What everything is about. Then over here would be like a subtopic. Maybe where, like locations. If we're talking about the location of specific activities or things that we might do. Or we can have another subtopic here that is about maybe the way it looks. So we're looking now at features, characteristics of a topic. So I might have my major topic here and then have location and physical characteristics. And then within this one, I'm going to focus here. So my topic, my physical characteristics, let's say that's it. Within that, I might have multiple points that I make. Let's fix that. Multiple points that I'm going to make. So within physical characteristics, I might talk about different aspects of the physical characteristics of my topic. And that might be broken down into 1, 2, 3, 4, or even more. For the sake of our example today, we're going to say 4. So we would say that all 4 of these connect with that one subtopic here. So it kind of builds on like this. Now you'll see as we continue through with our study on nonfiction text structures, you will see some more specific examples in our read alouds that we do together. And we're really going to talk about how nonfiction text might break down into categories and subcategories. But you can absolutely think of these as major topics, areas to learn about, maybe a chapter on a specific area, and then our subheadings to go into more depth and detail. The third way that authors organize information that we're going to take a look at is to compare and contrast. Now, you'll notice this is 2 things here, and I want to be clear that it can be 2 or more. So when we compare and contrast, we're looking at how things are similar and how they are different. And we often use a specific graphic organizer called a Venn diagram when we do this. This would be an example of a Venn diagram. Now, if I wanted to compare and contrast, let's say a flower and I'm going to compare and contrast it to a tree. Well, we know that flowers and trees share some characteristics and other characteristics they don't. So everything here would only be about my flower. That means only a flower has this characteristic. And everything over here would only be for a tree. So only a tree has this characteristic. And then everything in the middle here means both. They share the characteristics with both. So, for example, when I think of a flower, I think of buds, right? Flowering buds, pretty petals. Normally, you might think that's just a flower, but I know in the spring, our trees have flowering buds as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put that. But I also know that a tree trunk has bark, and I've never seen bark on a flower. And it also has branches. And flowers kind of grow in bunches, right? So that would be another area. So with branches, and then we could have a bunch of flowers. They're all together, but they don't separate off into branches. But they have a stem, not a trunk. And here they have a trunk. So now we're comparing and contrasting. So when we contrast, we're talking differences. So every difference that we see here, this is our contrasting. And everything we find that's alike or similar, this is when we compare. So contrast is different, compare is similar. Now, you can also, as a writer, use words that compare and contrast, and that is another clue that could tell you when a text is a compare or contrast text, or if the author is organizing the information in that specific way. And some of those key words can be found in this chart that help us know if they are comparing or contrasting. And remember, you can also use these in your own writing as an author. So we can compare is to recognize how things are similar, and contrast is to recognize how things are different. Another way that authors organize information is through cause and effect. Cause and effect can be a pretty complex topic, and it's mostly because we tend to think of cause as being what comes first when really it's not. We say cause and effect, but really we start by looking at effect. And effect is what is happening, and cause is why is that happening. So, for instance, we might say that an effect may be that the flower is dying. Well, this is what is happening, so this is my effect. Now, the cause is what's causing that. What is causing the flower to die? So this cause, I can stop and ask myself, well, I noticed that it hasn't rained in weeks, so no rain. This is my cause. And the effect of no rain is that my flower is dying. So we take a look at the effect first. That's the action, the what, and then we stop and ask ourselves why. And when we ask ourselves why, that is when we have identified the cause. And you can look at the resource here to see words that show cause and effect. And these words are keywords that you might see in a text that an author has used to show you this is how they're organizing their information. Or these words can be used by you as a writer in the way that you are organizing information. And basically, they are showing you cause and effect. So they are talking about the why something has happened. So remember, cause and effect, you want to think why something is happening. It is easier to identify the effect, that's the action, the what is happening, and then stopping and thinking about the why. The last way that authors organize information that we're going to talk about here is problem and solution. Now, this is something that we actually talk about in fiction texts as well. Most storylines have a problem and solution, and it's the same thing with nonfiction. Sometimes authors might take a problem like littering and then describe how that problem can be fixed or solved. So then they're describing a problem or solution by talking about the problem itself and then giving possible ways to fix it. And then again, words that can clue us in that the author is showing a problem solution is given here in this graphic organizer. This show, or in this resource. So these are words that an author might use that would give you a clue that the author is using problem and solution to organize their writing, or these are words that you might use in your own writing if you are trying to organize information as problem and solution. So now that we've talked about the different ways that authors might be able to organize information, it's actually really important that we stop and think a little deeper about it. So, for instance, it's important that we recognize that authors can organize information in several ways within the same book. So, just because an author has chosen to compare and contrast doesn't mean that they can't do problem and solution as well. They can. So authors can actually use more than one way to organize information. So they can use more than one method to organize their information. Now, when you're looking at signal words or clue words to guide us in, there is a resource here. These will go over all your basic structures that we've just talked about. Time, order, or sequence, that's your chronological and temporal. Your cause and effect, compare and contrast, and problem and solution. So again, these are just signal words that you can look for as a reader or that you can use in your own writing. But keep in mind that you might be able to use more than one, or an author might be able to use more than one within a text. And then lastly, when we're looking at the ways that authors organize their information, we want to think critically. And one way that we can do that is to ask ourselves questions. Now, this resource is really just a bank of questions to consider. So thinking and stopping, is the information within a text clearly and logically presented? Or how is the information organized? And how does the organization make it more interesting or easier to understand? So when we stop and think about the reason why an author has organized the text a certain way, we begin to better recognize the information and better comprehend the information, that we are reading. So stopping and thinking critically about why did the author organize the information this way? And did it benefit me as a reader? Did I learn the information the author wanted me to learn? So stopping and thinking critically about that. Now that you have finished this, you are going to watch one more Edpuzzle video today, and that is going to be on how to annotate nonfiction text.